What path are you on? It's a good question, right? Sometimes maybe we don't slow down to even think that we could be on a certain path or we're on a path for a certain thing or a certain place. Let me give you where this comes from. It's like, maybe you graduate high school or even in high school is like, what path are you on? What path of education are you on? Or what path of career are you on? Well, there's a different path that I think you need to be paying attention to. So let's go to our Bibles. Okay, so the Bible in Matthew 7:13-14 says, enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And there are many who enter it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it. So what does that mean? Well, first we got to figure out what that means in the Bible. Okay, so what that means in the Bible, and through my notes here, so I'll be looking at my notes, is that we must make our faith our business. It must be our priority. It must be something that we hold in front of other things, that we value it out in front of the worldly passions and pursuits. Not saying that our pursuits and our passions in this world is ultimately wrong, but there is sin and wrong in this world. And what Matthew is writing here, well, actually, these are the words of Jesus that Matthew physically transcribed for him into his book, that this is part of chapter 7 is a great book for you to go through. If you're new to the Bible, or if you've been reading the Bible for a long time, this Matthew 7 is a great place to go. Because 15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly ravenous wolves. So there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of education in Matthew 7. There's a lot of correction. Now, what does this chapter 7, verse 13 and 14 talking about? The narrow gate and the wide gate, or the narrow path and the wide path. Well, contemporarily, we have to pull this down from that an account has to be given that certain ways are bad and certain ways are good. Okay. And in this part of the Bible, we're saying that wide, meaning that you're not focused on the one thing called Jesus, wide being the path, it's going to lead to destruction because you're going to chase, apprehended, be taken hostage by all the things of the world. And you're not going to be focused on the creator of this world, the creator of yourself and everything around you. So no matter where your belief systems are, and no matter where you fall out as far as your biblical knowledge, this can be a great help to you because you can apply this to anything. And first of all, number one, I want us to apply it to our soul. And I'm not talking about your heart. I'm talking about your soul. And am I on the narrow path with my Creator, with Jesus and with God? Because without that, what you're doing here is going to be the closest you ever get to heaven, because we are living in a temporary place with temporary things. And our Bible tells us that there is something after this. And I truly believe in a heaven and a hell, and that this passage of Scripture is telling us how to avoid it and telling us what happens if we do not live on a narrow path. So let's throw this up and catch how this translates into every part of our life. So your diet, say with food, let's say you ate everything under the sun, everything if it doesn't matter if it was sugar, whatever it is, you just pour it in. You did not account for the calories. You did not account for how it was made. And you just poured everything in. You're in a very wide path when it comes to your food. What's going to happen? Well, some of us are blessed, not this self, is I'm not blessed with a fast metabolism and being able to eat whatever I want and not have a benefit and not have a negative benefit from it. But there's going to be a consequence, and that consequence is being unhealthy, maybe not living as long, or your life expectancy, or the value of your life. And when I say the value of your life is how well you live and how healthy you are and how capable you are through your life could be extremely tied to your diet. Now, let's go to number two, your fitness. But with fitness, let's say You work out for 10 hours one day and you don't work out again for 2 months. That's wide, right? It's a very wide schedule, very no structure, nothing tight, nothing consistent. It's wide. There's no right and there's no wrong. It's my determination, my opinion, how this works. What's going to end up happening? Well, you're probably going to end up hurting yourself on that day you tried to do 10 hours, and then you're going to have to take a long time to get yourself back to normal. That's just part of it. Now, what about your relationships? What if you lived where you never talked to anybody, you never communicated, you never spent time with your significant other, your spouse, your husband, your wife, or your children? What would be the result of that? Well, the wide path would leave people the room to leave, for the relationship to not exist. Business. Let's say you run a business, or you as an employee live in a wide thing. Well, today I'm only going to make 3 calls, or I'm not going to make any calls, or I'm going to make 100 calls. And then the next day I make no calls. What happens? There's no consistency. There's too much space in between your consistency and what is required of you. And you live in this place where there's no rules and no standards. And I know a lot of people don't like the word rules. It's in your DNA not to like rules. I mean, we can roll back in our Bible and see that there was a group of people exiled from Egypt that continuously bucked against the system when it came to rules and the problems, and always complaining and not believing and not having any consistency in how they behaved. So this is a problem that we all have to deal with. And you can see it as children. Let's just say you've got a small child. They live in a very wide world, but there is really close boundaries. They live in a place where there's really not a lot of rules. It's their way, right away, right now. And there's not a lot of push and shove in that, but you don't let them go play in the street because they're not wise enough at that time not to get ran over. So you automatically put the boundaries on them to keep them into a tighter place. So where they're ignorant or don't know standards or don't have rules or don't understand what can harm them or not, you kind of put the circle around them so you can help them stay within a safe boundary. And this is what Jesus is implying. I could say there would probably be the majority of them might not know the true Jesus and have a true relationship and a rebirthing relationship with Christ. So they are in danger. I think there is some Christians out there, some people who are in the family branch, grafted onto the branch of Abraham, that live in this wide path, and they're going for this wide gate. They're trying to grab 2 things at one time. They're trying to grab the world and grab Jesus. And there's going to be consequences for that. So what are the consequences? Well, that would be a Christian that still struggles with a bunch of worldly problems. And what would that be? Lust and a bunch of desire and, bankruptcy and just a bunch of fallouts because we don't have standards. Saying that good, honest, everyday people can't have bad things happen to them, but we can always kind of like shoot the arrow right to the middle of the bullseye to say most of the time there is contributing factors that we can't control, and we just have to deal with them. But there's determining factors that we can control, but if we don't control them, then they will end up controlling us. So on this wide path, and the reason there is destruction, it says right there, the broad way leads to destruction because you don't have any place to put your feet. There's no grounding. There's no standard. There is nothing there to say, this is the left side of my standards and this is the right side. And you might have to flip that around because of how the camera works, but I don't have a purpose and I don't have a compass to get me to my purpose. So why the narrow gate? Why do we want to go in the narrow gate? Well, first of all, biblically, the narrow gate is faith and salvation in Jesus Christ and Christ alone. And that is the narrow gate. And there are few who find it, because even some of the people who are just about to click off this or maybe already checked out of this they just don't believe that. There's not enough evidence for them, or they haven't heard the message correctly. They're just checked out, and they're not going to go on that narrow gate saying that Yes, there has been damage done to this world from a fall from Adam and Eve. And we'll get into Adam and Eve on a different podcast, but there's been a fall, and then humanity has tried to get right or recover from that in many different ways. And that's what we read in the Old Testament, where God tried to give laws and rules. And these rules and laws could never be maintained. That the standard was always so high because God's standard's way up here, and our highest standard is probably right here. Because we're going to go for comfort and probably selfishness faster than we would holiness. And that's the word that I want to use, is holiness is in the narrow way. And holiness is not lack of sin, because if anyone tells you that there's a place you can get where you're not sinful in this life, they probably read some books wrong, and they have gotten deceived to think that there is full restoration of our souls here on this earth, which is not correct. And there's no way. You can't control your mind. You can't control your inner thoughts and feelings. You might be able to remove some of them, but I'm sorry, you get cut off in traffic, there's probably going to be a cuss word pop up into your head, and you're not going to want to sing worship songs with this person. You're going to want to sing something up against their chin because they've wronged you. It's just our nature. We can't get there by ourselves, and the reason why we couldn't get there is because God is God. He's the creator of all things, and his standard is extremely high. So what happened was, the man who spoke these words, Jesus Christ, came sinless, born of a virgin. I know I've lost some people already, but this is just the truth that I believe, and that is written in this book called the Bible. He lived a sinless and perfect life for 33 years, 3 of that being a ministry where he walked with 12 disciples, was then turned to get one of these disciples turned on him. I'm sure he knew, because he even said at the Last Supper, there's someone here who will deceive me. So he knew this was going to happen. What was the first? I got to take you back. In the garden, Adam and Eve were tempted by evil, by the serpent, by Satan, which was a fallen angel, to say that they wouldn't die. He twisted scripture to say that they wouldn't die if they ate of a fruit of the tree. What he really meant is he was talking about the flesh. Your flesh is not going to die. He left out that the soul is what was going to die. And because we were given the full story, not just a good story, we got the good and bad story, our hearts inclined immediately to want to be God, to be the only influence, to be the one who sets the rules. Go back to the 2-year-old. They're little gods. They're little people who think the world is because of them and for them. And if that comes out of order, there's problems. There's screaming and hollering and kicking and fussing and all this stuff. Well, they're not on the narrow way. And once you are saved, once you have believed the gospel that Christ came to cure the soul of these sins. Now, I say cure, I did not say remove. So there is a cure. There is that means to cure something, that means you have to have it and then you get something for it. But this is something that never leaves us while we're still in this body. So that's the reason why the gate is narrow and the path is small that leads to life, that leads to holiness. And the reason why there are few that find it is because it is really hard for people to live on an extremely difficult, unselfish standard. Everyone can live in standards if there's something in it for them. There's something in it for them, there's no problem in their living by a strict standard. I lived by extremely strict standard to lose some weight, did 75 hard. That was extremely hard. It was strict, all this stuff. And I gathered all the power I could to get through it. But there was a time where I had to quit. There was a time where I had to stop because I'm just not built to be under that kind of pressure forever. And that's what the narrow path is. The narrow path is you looking yourself in the mirror on a daily, constantly reminding yourself of what you need to be better at, then realizing you can't do that and giving it to someone else because they are the one who can fix it. So it takes you completely out of the equation. That's why people don't like the narrow path. The narrow way is it doesn't benefit you in this world. It doesn't benefit you in life. It does benefit you. You become a completely different person. And that's why it says, the Bible says you must be reborn, born again. Nicodemus was talking to Jesus and he was like, what, should I go back into my mother's womb? And it's like, no, there will be a time where you put your feet down and say, I'm going to follow Jesus. And when you do that and you give your life to him, and he already has your life, but then you're offering it back to him. It's like if I had $1 million and I gave you $1 million and you gave it back to me. Well, but in God's economy, he gives you life and then allows you to give it back and you benefit from it. So Ray, where are we going here? Why are we talking about this narrow way? The narrow way, the small gate, the little gate, is the reason why you're having so many problems is because you're not going for the little gate. You're going for everything. You're going for the world and its pleasures, and you're trying to get people to like you. You're trying to become an influencer. You're trying to become God. You want to be the only one that's important. You want to be the one that takes all the credit and gets all the reward. You want the world to be revolving around you, and it's not going to work. Even for the people that you see it working, let's just say they have influence and money and businesses and a million people following them on social media, they're still on the wide gate. They're not coming off until they are reborn. You can be a saved Christian and still have a big business, still have a lot of money. It is a lot more difficult to be a Christian and have these things because you can't do that inappropriately. When I know all of you are going to sit here and, well, not all of you, but some of you are going to pick out some televangelists that are multimillionaires running around jet planes. Look, these whack jobs don't become these people without people giving money to them. It's a false gospel. That's why I read verse 15. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing. So these false prophets out here, and that can be in the Christians, they could be false teachers, they could be false prophets, meaning business owners or people trying to, get you involved in stuff. They come in sheep's clothing. They come, hey, I'm here to help, to make you great, to make you perfect. And then really, they're just a serpent in a sheep's clothes. They're a wolf. That's what they call them, a ravenous, a hungry wolf. I don't know if y'all know much about that species of dog. I think they're a kind of my dog, but they're not my dog. Grayson, my little rescue dog that's half pitty and half husky, there might be some similarities between these two, but he's his kind and wolf is his kind. These animals don't back down when they're hungry. They can take down animals that outweigh them by thousands of pounds because their hunger drives them, because all they want to do is consume, because it's their nature. I mean, they have to eat. It's nothing personal. It's just they have to eat. Well, these people, these false prophets come to you dressed like you, talking like you, acting like you. Let me say that again. They come talking like a Christian, acting like a Christian, maybe even behaving like a Christian, but really they're on the wide path because it's all about them. It's all about what they have. And look, we're told numerous times in the Bible where God does not take the wheat and the tares and separate them before he returns. He keeps them there. He keeps these wolves. He keeps these false prophets in with us to keep us on the narrow way, going towards the narrow gate. Because if we can't understand that there's still people trying to deceive us, and this is not us just like everybody's bad and everybody who says something or I disagree with them, that's a false prophet. No, it is, you might need to know your Bible before you can call someone a false prophet. Because if you haven't studied your Bible and you are not devout in your study and in your prayer and in your walk, You could be the false prophet. You could be the one who is deceiving. This is difficult because you got to look into a mirror that you might not look like what you're looking at. I have many times looked in the mirror and saw myself as that hungry dog. I've been walking that wide path, heading for that wide gate, and right in the middle of destruction. It's part of our life here in this world. That's why we need a church to sharpen us, to teach us, maybe to come up next to us and tap us on the shoulder and let us know that we are maybe stepping out of line. But that's part of being in the narrow way, where you will have people in your life that love you enough to tell you that something's broken. Another reason why people don't want to be on the narrow path is because there's accountability in the narrow path. Because if you do not have accountability, then you're making up your own rules. You could be deceived with your rules, and you could end up stepping off that narrow path and not realize it. So this is a game of chess, not checkers. We have to be careful. So I want you to go out and build big businesses. I want you to go out and build big lives. I want you to go out and go fight this world with everything you have. But if you forget that this is a game of good and evil, on top of us trying to do what it is for us to stay alive, you're going to end up getting smashed. And there's no way around it. There is no way around it. I mean, if you choose to participate or not, this is what's going on. You can see it. If you just took Matthew 7 and you read from the beginning to the end, even if you're not a believer, because there's probably books that you got in high school and that you got in college that you wasn't a believer of it until you read it. And then maybe you read it and said, I still don't believe in that. Or yes, now I believe in it. So that's my plea for you today. Just read Matthew 7. Doesn't matter what translation you jump on, even though there would be some people who say that there's only one translation. I would say that there's some translations out there on the Bible app that are not too great. I would say KJV, New King James Version, NASB, the Legacy Bible. That's your safety. ESV would probably be the last one I'd go to. I think that the other ones get to paraphrasing and the water gets muddied really fast, and you're going to lose the facts because of statements. It's going to be statements instead of the true word, and you need the true word. So if you're not a believer, challenge you to go listen to chapter 7, listen to it on the Bible app or read it. If you have questions, put it right here in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help you, because 1994 at Paris Island in 3rd Battalion, Company 3053, I was the 5th rack in on the left-hand side, top rack, with a Gideon Bible, and I read Matthew chapter 7, 13 and 14. And look, I'm not saying that's when I was saved, because I was far from it. But I did learn the principle of, for us to be successful in this world, we can't be all over the place. We can't not have standards and things work out for us. Some people win that way. Some people get away with it, but they don't get away with it all. I mean, there's a lot of men out there that are great businessmen, but they're very, very bad at being a parent. There's great parents that don't provide for their children right. There is great teachers who have never, you could say there's teachers out there that have never done what they're teaching, so there's kind of a double standard. This is a difficult place to be, called this world. You're going to have hardship. You're going to have pain and suffering and difficulty. It triples the pain when you're responsible for it. When all it takes is just a simple education and some simple conversations to really figure out how to do this, and it be okay with your soul. It will be well with your soul. And that's something to think about. So on verse 17 says, so every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. So a good way that we know that we're on the wide path is that we're bearing fruit, but it's not good. So what's your fruit look like? What path, what gate are you heading to? Are you only good at one part of your life, but then you let all the rest of your life fall apart? There is no such thing as balance. There's only a such thing as standards. Standards create what is perceived as balance. That gives a perception of balance. But there will not be a day that you live in this body that is not, you're going to be just torn into pieces, that you're going to have to gut yourself. You got to give it all every day. You can't leave anything on the table. You've got to push. You've got to put that work in, no matter, you got to work that job. You got to come home before you hit the door. You got to take a couple deep breaths. You got to find some mama and daddy energy, and you got to be there for your wife. You got to be there for your husband. You got to be there for your children. And look, a lot of this is that you got to be selfless instead of selfish. There comes a time when the narrow gate, you know you're on it when you look up and you're the most generous person in your sphere of influence. When you're the happiest, the most at peace, when you're the person who gives and expects to receive nothing. So that's the reason why few people find this. Few people find this because you dabble in it for a little while. There's not a big return on investment in this world. There can be. I believe that with enough patience, there's pastors out here that have very healthy churches. We have Christian businessmen and women that have healthy businesses. They take care of people. They make a bunch of money. They do well with it. They do good with it. But they still fight this every single day. They fight. Am I on the right gate? What does my fruit look like? Because you can't be a good tree and produce bad fruit. It's got to be good. How's your fruit? What path are you on? Get honest with yourself today to answer the question. I'm not screaming at you and tell you got to change. What I'm asking you to do is, will you step back and just look at what is happening in your life? What is going on? What's going on in your heart? What's going on in you? Is there good fruit in you? So, I got a cup. It's got water in it. And this is the last thing. So if that cup was empty, I could reach over there and shake that cup and there would be nothing come out of it because there's nothing in the cup. But it's full of water, right? Full of some high quality glacier water right now. If I shook it, the water would come out. Okay. Whatever's in the cup comes out. If I shake you right now, what comes out? If I shake you right now, what comes out? You can't get triggered unless your cup's already full of waiting to be triggered. You can't blow up on someone unless your cup's already full with anger and ready to blow up. What happens when you get shook? Who shows up then? And that's the person you need to look at and you need to say, is this good fruit or bad fruit? Look, we're human. I'm not taking out the human element here, but I believe that there can be work done here. And my Bible tells me that it is true work can be done here. All we have to do is be willing to do the work. So I'll read our verse one more time to close this out. Matthew 7, verse 13 and 14. Enter through the narrow gate. For the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction. And there are many who enter through it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life. And there are few who find it. People, whoever's still watching right now, I want you to find it. It's not in the cup of perfection. It's not in the cup of anything that you can do by yourself. But there is a way to be on that narrow way. The narrow way is possible. And the fruit from your tree can be good. And when someone shakes you, good things can happen. Not just bad. So thank you for taking the opportunity to watch this whole video. So if you made it this far, thank you. I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much. I'm beside myself. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you want to support us, share this with a friend. Hey, please check out my buddy. I co-host with Wade Carey at my Farewell My King. That's where all this started from. We started having coffee with Ray. That's what we called it, Coffee with Ray. And it was us having coffee at a Kroger somewhere in Jefferson, Georgia. So he said, hey, CWR, Wednesday at 2:00. Okay. So then it's Coffee with Ray. So that means me and him are going to meet. So I just took some of the things that we've talked about in our 10 years worth of hanging out with each other, more than 10 years now, and I'm just bringing it here. So today, the narrow gate, are you on it? Do you want to find it? And how's your fruit? If you need help, here I am. Please send me a message. Until the next time, in between times, stay blessed.